Hello and welcome to the top custom Hearthstone cards of the week. If you're looking for Rastakhan Rumble cards, I've been putting out videos every single day as they are revealed. You can check out that playlist here, but these are all fan-made cards. First up is Uppercut. 4 mana, warrior spell, send a minion into the air. At the start of your next turn, it returns to the board and takes 5 damage. I just absolutely love the flavor of this card, and it has a really unique kind of gameplay feature where you'll send a minion up into the air. I can't even imagine what that animation would look like, and it basically leaves the board during your opponent's turn. This means they can't attack, and it also means they won't be able to interact with it. Maybe they can take advantage of that and use a board clear that would normally remove that minion. For the player of this card, it's almost like a better version of freezing an enemy minion. I think this would be a really unique single target removal. Whether this actually kills the minion or it just deals enough damage that you can kill it the following turn, it definitely buys you a lot of time and can really help against big minions. Next up is Cordana Fellowsong. 2 mana 4/4 neutral legendary, where at the start of your game, shuffle this into your opponent's deck. Now you may be thinking, why would you want to give your opponent a 2 mana 4/4? Well, that's because it is 2 mana, and if your opponent has Keleseth, then if this is in their deck, they won't be able to get the battle cry. Usually I don't like tech cards, but this one's pretty genius. If your opponent draws their Keleseth in the early game, then they'll no longer be able to play it and get a big advantage. But regardless if they play Keleseth or not, you're giving your opponent a 2 mana 4/4, which can be a big advantage. Also, when playing this card, you're only going to have 29 cards in your deck now. Now, there would be the absolutely terrible instances where your opponent not only draws this card, but also Keleseth in the first 2 turns. That would be unfortunate. I really hope Blizzard prints more start of the game cards, because they could really go in a lot of unique directions, not just ones that buff your hero power. Whether or not this card would actually see play, you'll have to let me know. Next up is Immortus. 1 mana 1/3, not a 1/3, a 1/30. 1 mana 1/30 warrior weapon. Always start in your opening hand and cannot be enchanted. Now this is Harrison Jones value. This is definitely a unique weapon. Theoretically, over an entire game, you'd be able to deal 30 damage to your opponent. Although these days, that's probably not going to be enough to kill them. Like any one-attack weapon, this card's really its best in the early game. If you're able to remove an extra 1 health minion every single turn and only take a little bit of damage, then it could really save you a lot of health in the long run. But as time goes on, this weapon becomes worse and worse, and unless you literally just go face every turn, you're probably going to want to play another weapon at some point. Now, you definitely can not run any other weapons in your deck and use this weapon's entire durability. That would be a video I would want to watch. But as the game goes on, this 1 damage isn't really going to be that useful unless you just continue to go to the enemy face. Even then, it's going to have a limited effect on the game. Even though this can't be enchanted, there are a few interesting synergies with this card and minions like Phantom Freebooter and Furnace Fire Colossus. That's a lot of health. I think this is a little bit too ridiculous to actually print, but it's a really interesting idea to give a player a weapon like this for basically the entire game. Next up is Trophy Huntress. 2 mana 2/2 neutral minion with the battlecry, deal 1 damage to a Murloc, 2 damage to a beast, or 3 damage to a dragon. Nightmare Amalgam would be dealt 6 damage. Poor guy. But I think the appeal with this card is it's a tech card, but it's also very flexible. It's not to tech against one specific deck or combo. And also, I feel like the damage is distributed evenly. Usually Murlocs don't have a lot of health, so 1 damage is good. Beasts are probably the most popular tribe, and dealing 3 damage to a dragon makes sense because usually they're a little bit higher health and they're also more rare. The flavor of this card is great. I think making tech cards more flexible is also really nice. And I could definitely see people teching this in to combat certain popular decks. Up next is Greenstone Beard, 8 mana, 6/3 neutral legendary, with the battle cry, destroy minion, resummon it, and then destroy it again. So you could use this on an enemy minion just to destroy it, but you could also use it on your own minion. It wouldn't necessarily work with Cube because when you resummon Cube, it doesn't have the battle cry death rattle gained. Ever since they removed N'Zoth, they've been ramping up the power level of death rattle minions. I think while this card is really expensive, there's definitely a combo for it. Up next is Time Elemental. 1 mana 1/2 elemental for mage With the battle cry, you've played this last turn. I like the little hourglass effect too, that's kind of nice. So the battle cry is supposed to synergize with the elemental requirement of you've played it last turn. But what's kind of interesting about the text is it would also technically give this card charge. And I think a 1 mana 1/2 with charge is already pretty good. So even though you could combo this card with elementals, I think the problem is Elemental Mage is much more of a controlled deck. There are definitely instances where they could use this effect, but it's still just a 1 mana minion. Unless you're using the charge to combat aggro, it's really tough to justify such a cheap and low value minion. I think it's a great tempo card, and maybe this would actually be better suited in a Shaman Elemental deck. It could be too overpowered in that, but I just don't think it really fits in Mage. Up next is Aiming Practice, 4 mana Hunter spell. Change a minion's health to 1, then deal 1 damage to a random minion until you hit it. And that random minion can also include your own. So in a way, this card is like a Hunter's Mark, but with additional random damage. Sometimes you're going to be able to deal damage to other enemy minions, and maybe even clear them before clearing the targeted minion. I think the really important part about this card is the fact that it can hit your own minions, because if you are playing an aggressive Hunter, this card really doesn't work with your deck. You need to be okay with forfeiting your own board with this card. Now, depending on how many minions are on both sides of the board, it's most likely going to drastically change how much value you get from this. There is one design concern I have with this card, and that's it's kind of a comeback card. If your opponent has won the board and you don't have anything out, then this card becomes a lot better. Every once in a while you'll still just destroy one single target, but if your opponent has a big board, there's a greater chance you're also going to be able to clear other minions. It's kind of like the blue shell from Mario. This card is there to get you back into the game. And while I think that's debatable in a casual racing game, in a card game, you don't want to reward players that have played poorly. I don't think it's that big of a deal like Yogg winning people games, but it's something to consider. Next up is Lumberjack, 4 mana 4/4 druid minion. With the battle cry, destroy a friendly treant and gain +3/+3. So druid treant is not a very good class, but there is that new card that transforms all of your treants into 5/5s. It's definitely not as good, but if you're able to include cards that can better synergize than treants, then you may as well do it. There is the meme that this is a 4 mana 7/7, but again, in actuality, you are getting rid of 2/2 stats in order to get this card. I definitely want to see more treant synergy, and I like this card, but I think there could be even more unique ways of dealing with treants. I don't know, I'm just saying that I'm happy they included some treant synergy this expansion, and I think this card would also be a nice touch. Next up is Sausages. 1 mana Hunter spell, give a minion +1/+1, all beasts attack it. So the idea with this card is that you can give a minion, most likely an enemy minion, 1/1, and then all of the beasts on the board are going to attack it. You are of course at first buffing that minion, but then you can have your opponent's beasts attack into it, and you can also give your beasts a rush-like effect so you can clear it. You could also combo this with your own minion that has poison, and then have your opponent's big beasts attack into it. And sort of based off of the interactions that I'm aware of, even if one beast had enough attack, the minion that you buff with this isn't going to die until all beasts have attacked. So even if you have a small little poison minion, it can still clear all the beasts. In the Rastakhan expansion, every class has a new Loa Beast God, so this could definitely be a target. And I think it would be interesting to give Hunter some sort of combos to specifically tech against beasts. In some ways, it doesn't synergize with the class, but in a lot of ways, it totally makes sense. It's a fun card with some great flavor, and that is kind of a pun. So I hope they eventually add a spell like this to the game. Next up is Bladed Creeper. 2 mana 1/3 rogue mech. Enchantments applied to your weapon are also applied to this minion. So it's not like if you have this out on the board and then you buff your weapon, then it has that effect. Because in Rogue you have a weapon like Kingsbane that keeps all of its enchantments, this Bladed Creeper will gain all of those enchantments whenever you have the weapon equipped. That means it could have a lot more attack and health, as well as lifesteal and even poison. You don't need to use Kingsbane, you can just use the other weapons and still include some weapon buffs. But the advantage to Kingsbane is that you can continue to draw it and equip it again. I really love how with this card, you may end up being discouraged from shuffling Kingsbane back into your deck, because if you don't have your weapon equipped, then this is gonna go back to a 1/3. Great idea, and even with Kingsbane, I don't think it's overpowered. And last up is Deathstalker Morgai. 6 mana Shaman hero card. with the battle cry deal 2 damage to all non-Murloc minions. And the 2-mana hero power build a Murloc, craft a custom Murghoul, or Azam Murloc. Alright, so this card isn't anything super original, but come on, it's Murlocs with Build-A-Beast. I think this would be a great card. There's really not a ton of Murlocs in the game right now, and that's not actually a terrible thing for this, because really you could get some more consistent Murlocs. And the thing with Murlocs is they're not necessarily crazy value, whereas Build-A-Beast can actually help Hunter win control matchups. I think combining 2 Murlocs isn't going to help you necessarily in the long run. Maybe you'll get lucky and you'll get Ghostlight Angler, which can get you crazy echo value. In addition to completing the Murloc quest, this is a great way to continue adding value. I'm definitely biased because I do enjoy a good old Murloc deck every once in a while, but I think this would still be a fine card. Alright, those are all of the cards for the top custom Hearthstone cards of the week. Some of these were recorded before the final reveal, so it's not like I knew about every single card yet before I talked about these cards. With the expansion coming out soon, I'll be posting gameplay, but I'll try to keep up with more of these episodes. That's all for now, and until next time, ta-ta.